Our whole school was marched into concentration camp. We were separated from our parents. You have to keep this remembering in your mind. We did not see our parents for 5.5 years. So we ended up eventually in a huge concentration camp called Weishan, one of the largest held by the Japanese in China. And it had a big wall around it. Now the Japanese turned it into a concentration camp. They made it so that there was electrified wire on the top of the walls so that if you were to touch the wires, you would be killed. I was a child. And we were used to living in dormitories, so we lived in a dormitory in this place. I was in a dormitory, they called it the lower school dormitory. There were 13 of us girls. It had once been a room in the hospital. We weren't sick, but there was now a concentration camp. You see, our teachers were Christian missionary teachers that were brought into the concentration camp with all of the children. And they said, school will go on. You said, what is the concentration camp like? Well, the teacher said, school will go on. How can school go on? You sit on the floor, sit on the ground. Everything you would have was not like a classroom. We didn't have any separate classrooms. You either sat on the floor or sat out under the trees and school would go on. And they said, and you will have nice manners like we have now. And we were to have nice manners even though you were eating terrible food. I mean, awful food, maybe out of a tin can or out of a soap dish, because you sure don't you carry whatever you can into a concentration camp. Well, you can't carry china and silverware. When the first concentration camp we're in, the Japanese were right in front of the children, would practice bayonet drills. They would suit up with uniforms and protective gear, and they would charge at one another with bayonet guns, which have a sharp knife on the end. Really what they were doing was practicing how to kill people with a bayonet. Well, we thought that was very interesting. And we called it yaw practice because they would just scream when they charged at the other person to hit them with the bayonet. They would scream and say, yeah, I guess if you shout, you don't mind you're killing someone so much. Roll calls every day. The food got to be really, really terrible. So the teachers, brilliant, they knew that what helps a child to feel safe, even in a place like that, is to set up a world with comfortingly predictable rituals. Every day it's going to be the same way. You get up every single day the same. You're going to scrub the floor around. You slept on steamer trunks, like giant suitcases, because you didn't want to sleep on the floor because there were rats. So you wash the floor, you go in a proper line to eat, then you come back and you would have school. No one in our concentration camp died of hunger that I know of, starved to death. They certainly lost a lot of weight, and there were people in other Japanese concentration camps, like in the Philippines, that did die of starvation because there wasn't enough food. Then we had the bed bug killing competition because, you see what I'm talking about? The teachers made games out of these ugly things. I mean, who wants to sleep with bed bugs climbing on them? I mean, that is really gross. I mean, it feels horrible. They come out in the night and it's dark because you don't have electricity to see what it is, but you feel them going up your arm or up your neck or down your back. And sometimes your imagination tells you it's bed bugs, but if you woke up in the morning and you saw bites, you knew you got bitten by the bed bugs. And in the daylight, they would hide into every crack and cranny that you could ever imagine. The bed bugs, cracks in the wall, seams in your pillow if you had a pillow, or seams in a quilt if you had a quilt. You were sleeping on steamer trunks. They had lots of seams in them, little cracks. We had the battle of the bed bugs every Saturday in the summer. You got your thumbnail, or you got a knife if you had one. I don't remember that any of us kids had knives, but if you had anything sharp, you would go through every crack and cranny because you wanted, even if you couldn't see them, you wanted to go through wherever you thought the bed bugs would hide. and then you would squish them before they grew into big bed bugs and bite you. You would kill them. This is a piece of real silk from a parachute, silk parachute, that was dropped the Americans into the concentration camp to liberate her. This is the date, August 17, 1945. This is the B-24 bomber, and its nickname was the Armored Angel, the Armored Angel. And here are each of the men in the order in which they jumped. This was the first one. Major Steiger led the mission. All of these autographed this, and a girl in the camp took this. You can see she was going to make it, maybe like frame it, and then embroidered it to give it to one of the guys. I think she was in love with him. We were all in love with them, these men that had rescued us from the Japanese. Oh my sakes, August 17, 1945. We had not seen our parents for 5.5 years. People were getting really discouraged because as the war got dragged on, and we didn't know all the news out there in the world, but the Japanese had less and less food to give us, so the food was getting less and less, and people were getting really, really discouraged. They were fearful that the Japanese might try to kill their prisoners if we won the war, and so grown-ups knew about that. And they never told us children about that, so we didn't know it, but the grown-ups knew about that. I was sick with an upset stomach. Sanitation was really bad in this place, really, really bad. I mean, it was like troughs. You know, you didn't have nice flush toilets to sit on. So it was really, really easy to get sick because the sanitation was bad. Rats, flies, bed bugs. And I was sick. The other kids were in school. The teachers tried to make us go to school year round so that we were kept busy and not worrying about stuff. So they kept school going on, and school was starting, and it was early in the morning. It had already just starting, and I was lying on the steamer trunks in the dormitory room, and I was feeling really puny, and I heard an airplane, and no, that can't be an airplane. And but it was an airplane. I jumped up off the steamer trunks and I went to the window to look out of the window, and here was this low-flying airplane, really, really low. I said, whoever that is, all these parachutes were dropping outside the concentration camp beyond the barrier walls. And I said, I'm going to be the first person, whoever that is out there, that's got to be Americans. I have got to go and be the first to welcome them. Out of 1,500 prisoners, I think 1,499 people got there before I did. And I told you before that this Brigadier Strantz had said, we will have a victory medley. So the Americans dropped in the fields beyond the camp, and now here came the Americans, all the people in the men of the camp went to pick these Americans and carry them. They were like gods. They had meat on their bones, and they were suntanned. They looked handsome. Oh my sake, they were like gods. And they picked them up on the shoulders and were carrying them back to the gates of the camp, where they had dropped out beyond the gates. And when they got up to the edge of the doors of the camp, the Salvation Army was playing the victory medley. And one of the songs in the victory medley, not just Happy Days Are Here Again, but oh, say, can you see by the dawn, oh, say, can you see the Star-Spangled Banner still waving? And the young American just slithered down to a standing salute, and a young teenager in the Salvation Army band, he just fell on the ground and began to cry because the Americans took over from the Japanese. And it was amazing. The Japanese didn't fight them. Apparently, they knew that a couple of days before that, the Japanese emperor had given up. He what they called capitulation. He had said that, okay, Japan was stopping to fight. So that was the beginning of a whole new world for us, because the Americans then began sending parachutes, dropping with food, medical clothing. Oh my sakes. We, my brothers and sister and I, were reunited with our parents. September 11, 1945. So just not quite 3 weeks. About 3 weeks we got to see our parents after we had been, when the American liberators came. In 1 year, in 1997, I tracked down the 6 Americans. I couldn't, in 1 year, I had the help of a group that I never had even heard of before called the China-Burma-India Veterans Association. And one of them got my names of my heroes, and he sent me the name, address of every person in the United States with that name, and the name, address, and phone number. And I started calling and writing. And in 1 year, I found the 6 Americans. I couldn't find the Chinese interpreter, Mr. Wong, which children called him Eddie Wong. He was the Chinese interpreter because, of course, the Americans, if they had a bad accident and fell, had to crash in some who knows where, no man's land in China, they had to have somebody that could translate for them. So Eddie Wong was only he was a college kid, 19 years old. Not much older than you, Megan. Well, think about it. And so I found them all, and I made a big fuss over every one of them. I'd call up the newspaper in their town. I said, did you know that you have a hero in your town? And this is what he did. And the newspapers put them on the front pages, all around the country. I found two were already dead, but I found their widows. So I honored them all. I found a way of crisscrossing the country to visit each one and honor them face to face. Each reunion was unique. And it wasn't until last year, in March, I got an email. I had tried in China. Did he come to the United States, Mr. Wong? Did he go to Taiwan? I did not know. I read the email on a Sunday morning, and here it says, my name is Daniel Wong. It was the grandson of Eddie Wong, had been searching on the internet and found my name. He connected me with his grandfather. I'd found the last hero, or maybe he found me. This year I decided I would go to Mr. Wong, and I did. I went and visited in July, and my Chinese, I'm ashamed to say, we were completely able to speak Chinese and English as children growing up in China, but I'm sorry to say you don't use a language, you lose it. And I had my nephew who lives in Hong Kong, and he speaks about 3 dialects of Chinese, so he was my escort when we went there. And I visited Mr. Wong in China in July. It was a wonderful reunion. I kissed him. Oh, are you serious? We kept holding hands, and just it was unbelievable. It was like the happy. I don't want to say it is kind of the ending. It is the ending of my search, but the beginning of a happy friendship with Mr. Wong. And the beautiful part was, I got a chance to make him famous in his own country. And I really wanted that to happen for him because, he was the youngest of the team, and not necessarily good things happened to him later because he was a friend of the Americans, and the communists were not that thrilled with people that were friends of the Americans. That these days, it doesn't matter that he's a hero. But I had a wonderful visit, and I feel as though honoring Mr. Wong across China, the newspapers across China put stories in about this and pictures. Couldn't say some of the pictures got far away, even in England, they were printing pictures of my reunion with Mr. Wong. But yeah, you know what? I have lived a miracle, and I like to recognize the miracle, and I also like to recognize the American heroes, because I know that every one of the people in that plane risked his life to rescue me and 1,499 other prisoners in that concentration camp. We can never, ever, ever say enough thank yous to people who risk their lives for us every day in the military to keep us safe. And that is why my message when I talk is to tell about the American heroes that liberated them. They didn't know us, but I'm glad I could say thank you.